What's up, everybody? I got an interesting one for you today. We're going to talk about rats. That's right, I'm going to hit you with a rat rant. We're going to get into it, and I've got a little video to show you about the rat plague in Australia from the BBC. And then also, this is one of the headlines that I saw amongst many others. Mutant sewer rats spreading through major U.S. cities as scientists discover disturbing DNA changes. So these rats have acquired a mutation that actually changes the way that their blood thins or thickens, coagulates, because most of these rodenticides or rodent poisons actually deal with thinning out the blood. And so what we're finding is in New Jersey, in New York, and in Pennsylvania and Washington, D.C., there's genetically mutated mice, and I guess some rats, although some reports are saying it's mostly the mice that are having this mutation. While I'm also reading stuff that rats are becoming harder to trap and exhibiting evasive behaviors. Now let's get off the Daily Mail because that's just an adpocalypse. Okay, so why are we talking about rats? Well, look at the kind of stuff that could be going on. There's two different things that have been in the news recently, as like this Australia story, as well as hantavirus. Hantavirus is a disease that's spread by rodents, so we have to be aware of some of the things going on. So let's check this out. In Australia, hopefully the volume's all right.
Rain, this is too much.
I don't know why they're laughing so much.
Is that the most? No.
Holy crap. That's so many. I don't know if you can see that very well. It's just so many mice scurrying around all over, or rats all over the field. It's a little different in Australia. So this actually happens because they have bumper crops some years where the harvest is so big on some of their grains, and apparently they just have a huge influx of rodents, so they're trying to figure out how to deal with that. But here's the problem, is that with mice and rats apparently becoming resistant to rodent poisons, we have a bigger problem on our hands, because that's one of the main ways that we've been dealing with rodents. And I've kind of been on this kick for a while personally about how we got to not be using rodent poisons because it's a big problem. Oh look, I'm kind of out of the center now. Let me try to figure that out. So yeah, when we go about using rodent poisons, one of the main problems is that the rodents that have this poison inside of them get eaten by other animals higher up the food chain, and this toxin builds up in them over time. So even if they eat one rodent and it doesn't kill them, it's a non-lethal dose, they eat another rodent, it's a little bit more poison, and they keep eating them until boom, now you got a dead hawk on your hands. And this is very prevalent. There, in some areas, they find like 100% of the birds that they tested had some of these chemicals in their blood, these poisons, from eating rodents. And then they could also eat the bait directly in some instances, but largely we're talking about when things go as planned, the rodent eats the poison, and then yeah, something else might eat the sickened rodent or eat the carcass of the rodent, and then you're going to be dealing with things going up the food chain. And it's problematic because these are the predators of the rodents. So if the poisons are no longer effective against the rodents, and the rodents continue eating that bait, then we're going to have more toxicity going up the food chain. See how that's problematic? So a lot of people have been a little bit overactive, if you ask me, with their rodent poisoning techniques, and I really wish that people would use different methods. So I've got one anecdote of something interesting that happened to me. So a lot of people may have noticed, and you know, this kind of affects everybody, whether you're renting and you're having to deal with it because your landlord won't deal with it. If you're a homeowner, they could cause a lot of damage to your infrastructure in your house. And if you're a gardener like me, they can be causing you a lot of problems. And a lot of people might say, oh, nature, let nature be nature. We have created like a perfect environment for rodents to multiply and for their predators to not be able to get into those environments. Like, people absolutely freak out here when they see coyotes, at least most people. I love them, but like, they're like, oh, my small dog, my cat, oh, my kids, coyotes. I don't know that they're that dangerous, honestly, from my research, but anyhow, people freak out about them. They don't want them around in the cities, even though they're all over the place. Well, what's going to eat the rats then? If we don't have like the small mammals, if the small mammals can't really survive in our cities for the most part, and the birds can't really survive in our cities for the most part because we're not creating enough infrastructure for them. I know there's birds in the city, but you know what I'm talking about, birds of prey. You don't see as many hawks as you would in a place that has more fields, green belts, natural areas, because they need those as hunting areas. So Also, we use more poison around urban areas, so you might also see that there's going to be more problems from that upstream effect as well. So we're creating the perfect environment where not only is there a lack of predators, but there's also places for them to live, hide, and nest that they would never have in the wild. It's way too easy for mice and rodents to survive. Also, you have a lot of people unintentionally feeding them by doing things like they put birdseed out, but you can buy birdseed that has spices on it, like capsaicin, hot pepper spice, and that's actually good because the rodents won't really eat that. They don't like that, but the birds can eat that. So if you want to feed the birds, make sure that your bird feeders are either in a place that rodents can't access them, because you're just going to be feeding the rodents, or they're in a place that, you have like spicy birdseed, or you're making it spicy yourself so that it's not enticing to the rodents. Another thing that I see people doing all the time on the internet now is direct sowing, or just like chaos seeding is what they call it now, even though you could call it just broadcast sowing, is where you throw the seeds out. And there are ways to do this effectively. There are ways to do this correctly, but like a lot of the time, if you try to do that where you're living, the rodents are just going to come and the birds are going to come and they're going to eat all those seeds. So there are a lot of ways that people are inadvertently feeding these rodents. Of course, open trash cans are one of the main culprits. And then on top of that, we just created lots of fertile breeding grounds for them, like little nooks and crevices. So what we can do is we can try to clean up our yards to whatever extent we can, of nesting areas for them, of food sources for them, and try to seal off entry points into our houses. That's the first thing you can do, is physical barriers. Now the next thing is you have to decide, do you want to interfere? Is the rodent population out of control? Because there is such thing as a healthy rodent population. But once it gets out of control, that's going to be when not only will they bring more harm to the surrounding communities, but they're also going to bring more harm to themselves. Because as these rodents are breeding and multiplying, not only are they territorial, they're going to be fighting and killing each other, which is kind of gnarly, but they're also going to be spreading more diseases. You're going to be seeing more ticks among the populations. You're going to be seeing more hantavirus and other things like that when you have a massive amount of rodents confined in a small space. So yes, I do believe that it is our responsibility as humans that created this condition for rodents to multiply out of control, that we do step in and do something about it. In the same way that they'll do like open season on the pythons in Florida, I believe, and then they have certain areas where the pigs are out of control, or where you have certain like mule deers are out of control because we've gotten rid of the wolves, or we've set up the perfect situation, or climate change. That's one of the reasons the rodent population is out of control this year in a lot of different places, is because when you have a warm winter, like we did here, for instance, and I'm not even in the news where I live for the rodent thing, but what I do see is lots of my neighbors complaining on the local Nextdoor app about how they're having issues with mice and rodents that are way worse than they ever have before. So yes, this is something that we need to get onto. Rodent poisons are extremely problematic, and they have upstream effects on the predators and the rest of the ecosystem. And not only that, but the rodents are becoming immune to these poisons. So yes, this is a serious problem. We've got to start being a little bit better about taking responsibility for our own properties, for the places that we're living, and being respectful and responsible to the environment, so that we don't create these festering wounds, basically, where populations are able to breed out of control, and then it creates where you have to become like a straight up exterminator yourself. So let me tell you an anecdote. So lots of things can cause rodent populations to move in to your area. And for instance, recently more rodents have been coming onto the property I live on because the neighbors were doing a big renovation. They had an industrial yard that was largely unused for the first 2 years I was living here, and suddenly, boom, there's like 8 guys working there every day doing masonry work. So boom, all of a sudden, like clockwork, I started seeing more rodents. A lot of people will also experience this when their neighbor gets their house tented or something. All of a sudden you'll be like, wait, where did all these mice or rats come from all of a sudden? So the warm winter, activity in your neighborhood, other things going on, we have this, like, lots of mice and influx and rodents. So yeah, I had a lot of rat traps out. I had a lot of mouse traps out because I have a nursery and I have some gardens, and I like to do my part to actually cull the populations a little bit for the reasons that I described previously. So I was noticing, man, the rats are not taking the bait. And I was doing what I could, putting them in the right places where I normally would catch them. But I was seeing them on my trail cams at night but I just wasn't catching them. This huge rat just kept walking past the trail cam, taunting me, and I just couldn't catch him. Then all of a sudden, one day, finally, I caught that big rat. And after that, over the next week, sorry if this is a little gruesome, I won't get into detail too much, but over the next week, I caught like 10 more rats and then mice. So I was like, this was weird. How come I caught one and then all of a sudden I caught a bunch more and then suddenly mice where they weren't before? And this was becoming a serious problem. Like, they were out of control. They had found some nooks. My landlord has some little nooks on the property, sadly, that I'm working to try to get him to clean that up. And I garden, so I have to take responsibility for some of it myself. So not only that, there was one up in our attic. I took care of that one too. So I'll tell you the story of the rat apocalypse. So I catch the giant one, then I start catching more rats, then I start catching mice. I go, what the heck happened? I start doing some research. So apparently, rats are hierarchical. And so there is like an alpha rat. It's just kind of like a movie where it's like, the alpha knows. And so the alpha rat has access to the food in the area. And so if there's a trap that's baited, that's the alpha rat's like territory. That's his stuff. Nobody really wants to touch it because it's his. But if the alpha rat is smart enough to know that like he doesn't mess with rat traps, then all of the rats that are like under his dominion are going to also avoid that trap as well. The other thing is that mice are extremely scared of rats, and so when there's rats in the area, mice will actually get off their regular mouse path and they'll go to an alternative path. So you'll stop catching mice in the normal pathways when rats come onto the scene, because rats will take over the dominant pathways. But some rats, like I said, exhibit this trap avoidant behavior. They're more evasive than they used to be, and so yeah, you're gonna have to get creative with it, and we can get into that in a second. So boom, it's like the apocalypse. I catch them all. I'm even able to get the one in the attic using an electrified trap. I felt like an exterminator. I saved myself a bunch of money. There was real problems with this, and I cleaned it up. I cleared it up. There's still always work to do because they'll come into your yard and you have to figure out what you're going to do and whether it's enough that you need to take serious action or whether it's just, there's going to be rodents outside sometimes. It is what it is. So you want to, like I said, do all the things I described, do what you can. But yeah, so once that alpha was gone, then once the rest of the rats were too dumb, they weren't the alpha. So they didn't know how to recognize the traps, and boom, like clockwork, they just fell, or like dominoes, I guess I would say. Then after that, the mice were like, there's no rats. Now we can use the rat trails. And when they started using the rat trails, boom, they ran right into all my traps. So that was a really crazy one. So it goes to show you that rodents are pretty intelligent. There is a lot of reasons why your traps might not be working. So here's a couple of quick tips, and I know you can get these all over the internet, so I'm just going to be real brief with these. When you're handling your rodent traps or other kind of things that you're doing, use gloves if you can. I like to use kill traps, honestly, because I think it's more humane than sticky traps. Some people have a lot of success with bucket traps, although I haven't personally. I guess it just depends what kind of rodents you have. Switch up the brand of trap you're using, switch up the kind of bait you're using, switch up where you're putting your traps, and like I said, use gloves when you're handling them so that you don't put your scent on it, because they are pretty smart. And do what you can, do your part, because you might say, oh, that's so messed up of you to be killing these rats. Well, then they're going to get poisoned. And when they get poisoned, you're killing a hawk. So is it more messed up of me to be killing a rat? Or is it more messed up for the people to be killing that hawk? And what am I supposed to do in the meantime if no one's going to be taking action? I feel like it's kind of like my responsibility. And maybe your responsibility too. So do what you can. That's my PSA. That's most of the rat rant for you. Although, yeah, what's going on in Australia is a little bit of a separate thing. I just wanted to show you like how crazy things get, how out of control it can get. I wanted to encourage everyone to do their part, give those couple of tips that I could. Oh yeah, so you want to put your traps up against a wall as well. Like if this is the wall, you want your trap to go right up against it perpendicularly because they run up against the wall. A lot of people will put them like sideways or go perpendicular against the wall. So yeah, that's most of the tips that I have. And like I'm not trying to eradicate all rodents. I'm just saying like we've created an unnatural environment in urban areas. And if we're breeding mutant mice that are resistant to rodent poison, I mean, then like I said, that rodent can just be eating on that poison, putting more of it in its bloodstream and killing more birds. So let's do what we can, everybody. That's the end of my eco rat rant, and have a nice day. Peace.